April and I have been married for 25 years. We've had a lot of good years and a few not so good years. We started dating right after school. We didn't go to the same school, but we met at her friend's graduation party. She didn't show any interest at first, but by the end of the evening, she agreed to go on a date with me. We were affectionate with each other from the beginning, but we didn't have sex for over 3 months. Life went on, and we had sex whenever possible. I studied at college during the day and worked in the afternoon. April worked at my sister's store. I also worked there on weekends. A few months later, April told me she was pregnant. I knew better than to ask if the child was mine. She said that the only person she told was my sister, and that she had been to the doctor who confirmed the pregnancy. She asked what we should do. I loved April, but I wasn't ready for marriage or fatherhood. However, my parents always taught me to do the right thing, so I told April that we would get married. She told me not to marry her just because she was pregnant, that she could handle it on her own. I replied that I would marry her because I loved her, and the child just accelerated our plans. I told my parents about the pregnancy. They were not happy. My father said that I was too henpecked, that he thought I was smarter, and of course asked, "Why didn't you use a condom?" I told them we were getting married next month. My parents said they would help us because it was the right thing to do. We went and got married. My parents were witnesses, as well as my other sister and her husband. After the ceremony, we returned to my older sister's store, where our friends were waiting for us. Our parents took us to dinner. Then April and I spent the night at a motel. We had neither time nor money for a honeymoon. The next day, I was working at my sister's store, while April and my sister were looking for an apartment for us. They found a very cheap apartment about 6 blocks from the store, within walking distance. The next day, we started moving things. I skipped class to help with the move. We had almost nothing except personal belongings. Relatives gave us a lot of used furniture and things. Our apartment consisted of one room with a fold-out bed and a built-in kitchen with a small stove and refrigerator. It wasn't much, but it was ours. At the end of the semester, I dropped out of college. I simply could not combine 2 jobs and study. A few months later, we moved into my parents' old house. The state bought the house, and my parents were given 6 months to vacate it. They no longer lived there, but my aunt rented it. Since it was a duplex, April and I lived on the second floor for free. One day, April called me at work, and I rushed home to take her to the hospital. A few hours later, our daughter was born. My wife kicked me out of the delivery room. To be honest, I was even glad. She called me every possible name. I had to go out to calm down. My wife calmed down, and I returned to see our baby. I couldn't hold back my tears. It was so emotional to see the new life we created. April stopped working, and I started taking as much overtime as possible. Life was actually pretty good. We often visited relatives and friends who came to see our daughter. I forgot to mention that April's father died before I met her, and her mother was in a mental hospital. We went to visit her several times a year. She was eventually transferred to a nursing home. We visited her often and took her on walks until her death many years later. When our daughter Jessica was 4 months old, April became pregnant again. She took the pill, but apparently she was one of those rare women for whom it didn't work. She wanted to kill me, but I couldn't help. She carried the pregnancy to term, and we had another sweet girl who was born a month early. It was very sad to see our little daughter in the incubator. April was allowed to return home, but she went to the hospital every day to be with our baby. The joyful day came when we were able to take our baby home. April was an amazing mother. I couldn't believe that April was pregnant again 4 months later. This time it had to be a boy. April said that if I ever wanted to have sex with her again, I would have to do the procedure. Of course I did it. Now I want to tell you something important. I was young when we got married. In some ways, I was still immature and prone to flirting with other girls. I kissed a few, but didn't have sex with them. I knew it was wrong, but I was young and stupid. I sometimes went out with friends and flirted. At the time, I didn't consider it anything serious. April sometimes went out with her friends or my sisters. I trusted her. But one day, during the holidays, I kissed her friend and April saw it. She asked her friend to leave and never come back. She scolded me as best she could. I said it was just a celebratory kiss, nothing serious, but she didn't think so. She barely spoke to me for 2 weeks. April started asking my friends what I was doing when we went out. They made up stories about me having sex with women. When they realized she was serious, they told her the truth, but she didn't believe them. It took months for my wife to begin to trust me, and even then I wasn't sure she believed it completely. One day, after another argument, April told me that if I wanted sex, I should turn to one of my women of easy virtue. She's not going to do this to me. I was not a drinker, but I went to the nearest bar and drank. There I saw our neighbor who came up to me. "Hello, Jerry. Did you have a fight with your wife?" "Yes, she always accuses me of flirting." "Do you flirt?" she asked. "I think so, but I don't think it's something bad." I bought her a drink, and she put her hand on my thigh. "What will your husband say about you touching my leg? We have an open marriage. If I like someone, then why not? Do you want to go to the motel and talk?" She smiled. I knew it was wrong, but April kept blaming me for everything, and I was angry. I got up and Sarah and I drove to the motel. Damn, the sex was great. She said if I ever wanted it again to call her. When I left, I felt ashamed. I cheated in April, and I felt like crap. When I returned home, I walked past her, went down to the basement, and went to bed. We barely spoke to each other for the next few days. I came home from work, and she stopped me in the kitchen. "Did you sleep with that prostitute Sarah the other day?" "What?" I asked. "You did it, right. Her bastard husband came to me and said he wanted to have sex with me. He said you slept with his wife, and now he wants to try me. I took the knife and told him that if he came near me again, he would be sorry. Why the hell did you sleep with this prostitute? How many times have you been with her?" I knew I couldn't lie to her. "Yes, I slept with her. You said you didn't want anything to do with me anymore, and I was really angry, so I did it. This was the only time. You keep accusing me of things I didn't do, so I just said to myself, to hell with it, and did it. Do you want me to leave? I can go back to my parents." "No, you can stay here. We have 3 children, and they need a father. But sexually, I don't want anything else with you. We can continue to be a family, but we won't have any intimacy. I will remain your wife, but without sex." At that moment, the children came into the room and asked me to go out and play ball. I went with them. I had amazing children that one could only dream of. Their mother was always the one who raised them right. She did everything for them. Most mothers are happy when their children return to school in the fall, but April cried because she wanted them to stay home with her. Life went on, and we were a family. We went to all our children's competitions. The girls played volleyball and softball and also participated in the school orchestra. My son played every sport he could. He was a star baseball player and quarterback on the football team. He even tried his hand at wrestling and basketball. Damn, he was a talented athlete. We tried to attend all of their events that we could and only missed a few when the kids had games at the same time. Our family life was great, but our sex life was practically non-existent. We had sex maybe once every 3 or 4 months, and then only after a wedding or a big festive event. If April drank, she might want intimacy, and then we would have sex. I was happy when she drank. But the next day, everything was back to normal, and she always said that she didn't want to discuss it. I often thought about divorce, but in fact I loved her and knew that it was my fault that she did not trust me. Plus, I wanted to see my children on a regular basis. We took the kids everywhere with us as they grew up. They loved Cedar Point Amusement Park in Sandusky, Ohio, about an hour west of Cleveland, and Kings Island, which is 20 minutes northeast of Cincinnati. We went there every year. We also took the kids to the Columbus Zoo and the Newport Aquarium in Kentucky almost every year. April and I rarely went anywhere together. We lived in Coshocton County, which is in the center of the state, about 90 miles east of Columbus. We could get to all major cities within a couple of hours, even Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. After our children grew up and left home, I moved into a separate bedroom. I woke up often during the night and didn't want to disturb April. One day, I was watching adult videos on the computer when she came in. She called me crazy and asked what was wrong with me. I told her I didn't want to cheat on her again and I didn't have many other options. She no longer interfered when I was sitting at the computer. When our children got married, April always enjoyed babysitting her grandchildren. She loved being a grandmother. She signed up for several card clubs and went out with her friends once a month. I played golf with friends, and we would sometimes go out for a beer after the game. I tried not to flirt with anyone. I learned a lot from my mistakes. If you need to continue the translation, let me know. It's worth mentioning that April has always been a very beautiful woman. All my friends and neighbors always told me how wonderful and attractive my wife is. They also praised her cooking skills. It's true, she cooked incredibly delicious food. She said her secret ingredient was the love she put into her food. And this was indeed the case. Even if we both made sandwiches from the same ingredients, hers always turned out tastier. One day, she told me that she was going with her friends from the card club to Columbus. They were going to spend the night there because they were going to drink and didn't want to drive home drunk. She said she would be home around noon on Saturday. She had been in this card club for over 8 years. I knew all these women, their husbands and ex-husbands. She said she was staying at the Holiday Inn and gave me the room number. I always trusted her and never thought that she could lie to me. There were 8 women in the card club. She said her roommate would be Martha, a divorced friend. April looked amazing when she left the house. I have to say, it bothered me a little because she looked too good. I had a strange feeling when Marge came to pick her up. I did something I'd never done before. About an hour later, I drove to Columbus to see what was going on. It was an hour-and-a-half journey. When I arrived, I had to hide because all these women knew me and I could not explain why I was here. I saw an advertisement for a men's show on a billboard. April was the most beautiful woman in her group. I found out that the show lasted 2 hours and went to a sports bar where I had a couple of cocktails and ordered something to eat. I watched the game on the big screen until it was time to leave. When I returned, the show had just ended. Some of the women in their group were heading towards the elevators to go up to their rooms. I stayed away and didn't see April or Marge. Then I saw them both enter the elevator along with 3 men. I couldn't believe my April would do something like that. I just couldn't believe it. She looked a little drunk, but she was always happy and slightly excited when she was drunk. I went to the front desk and told them I had lost my key card. I showed my driver's license and gave him $5 for a new card. I waited 10 minutes and went up to April's room, hoping I was wrong. I opened the door and realized that she was cheating on me. April, who was already pretty drunk, looked up and said, "Jerry, what are you doing here?" I looked away without saying anything and closed the door. I had no idea what happened after I left. I went home and tried to sleep. This morning I got up and made myself some spam with eggs and toast. Around noon, April returned home, and the first thing she said was, "I'm sorry, I drank too much. You know how it goes." I looked at her and said, "I want to get a divorce. I spent the last 12 years with you because I loved you, but I actually slept with Sarah once. I regretted it and spent 12 years trying to fix it. When it came to sex, you didn't want to hear anything from me, but now I find you with 2 men. When was the last time we had one? We already sleep in different beds. I'll start looking for an apartment tomorrow. Until I find a place, I think we can get along. You don't have to do anything for me. I want you to know, I have always loved you, but I cannot forgive you, just like you could not forgive me. Tell the kids anything." Jerry, this was the first time. I don't want to hear this. I can't trust you anymore. Seeing you with those men was the worst day of my life. This is something I will never forget. 3 days later, I found a 1-room apartment. I spoke with a lawyer and filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. Time will tell how my life will turn out next. For the past 3 days, April has been trying to talk to me. I told her I didn't want to discuss anything. I saw with my own eyes how she cheated, and that was enough. I still wouldn't believe her words that it was the only time. It certainly didn't look like her first experience. She kept saying that she had never done this before, but I interrupted her. I told her that I didn't care if it was the first time or the 50th time I saw her, and that was that. At the meeting with the lawyers, we had to agree on the rules that would apply during the separation until the final divorce. April demanded child support even though she was working. She got a job at the department store when our kids were in high school and eventually worked her way up to assistant manager in the women's clothing department. We agreed that I would pay her $200 a week for 5 years unless she remarried. We had many assets, a house, 2 cars. Her car was newer and had payments, mine was old, but already paid off. We both had retirement accounts and $25,000 in a savings account. Even though we lived in a state where property was divided equally, the lawyers argued over the assets for over a month. In the end, we still had to divide everything in half. April wanted to keep the house, so she had to pay me $40,000 for my share and another $10,000 for my share of the furniture. She didn't like going back into debt, but she wanted to keep the house and most of its furnishings. I took one of the bedroom sets, my computer, stereo, and personal items. Our children were not surprised by our divorce. They all said they knew we weren't in a loving relationship. I couldn't tell them that their mother had cheated on me. It would have only hurt them, and they were already dealing with a divorce. I knew their mother had told them about my affair years ago, but they knew better than to mention it. They were just glad that we remained a family while they grew up. I felt much better living on my own. I missed April and her presence around me, and it really hurt me that she cheated on me like that. I began to wonder if she had been cheating on me all these years. I blamed myself all the time for staying with her, but I did it for the sake of the children. I knew April wanted to save our marriage. And why wouldn't she want it? She lived as she pleased while I knew nothing. But now I keep thinking what a fool I had been for staying married. Was I so blind that I didn't see what she was doing? After I moved out, April called me several times a week. She kept saying that she wanted to talk. I answered her the same way every time. I know what you did, but I don't want to discuss it. She repeated several times that it was the first time and that she was sorry. I told her I didn't believe her and usually hung up. In fact, I really wanted to know if this was the only time she cheated on me. I didn't believe her, but I really wanted to know the truth. I still went out with friends sometimes, but it wasn't the same. Some of them were married to April's friends and kept asking what happened to our marriage. I didn't want to tell anyone that she cheated on me. It was hard to contain it because everyone thought we had a good marriage. I had a best friend, Bob, who also went through a divorce. We have known each other since childhood. We went to the same school together, and I was best man at his wedding. He was married for 7 years until he caught his wife cheating and got divorced. He later married again a few years later and now has a wonderful wife and 2 children. He also had a daughter from his first marriage. His second wife and April knew each other, but were not particularly friends. Bob and I were on the same bowling team, and one day after a game we went to a bar. I drank a little and told him the whole story of why I was getting a divorce. It was nice to talk. Bob promised to keep it a secret and not even tell his wife. April called me about every 2 days. She wanted to discuss literally everything: insurance, car repairs, plumbing, mowing the grass, and even changing a light bulb. I told her that she was the one who wanted to leave the house, so she needed to deal with it on her own. Sometimes I helped her with some problems during our separation before the final divorce. Usually the kids would call me and tell me about some problem, and then I would come over to fix something. I tried to do this when April wasn't home. She wanted to know if we could remain friends. I said that I would be polite to her for the sake of the children and grandchildren, but we could not be friends. I told her over and over that I didn't trust her anymore. About a month after I moved in, I was feeling depressed and went to a bar to try to drown my problems in alcohol. Who did I see there? Marge, the same woman who was with April that terrible night. I approached her and asked if we could talk. "Jerry, I'm not sure this is a good idea. If April finds out I talked to you, She'll be very angry. I just have a couple of questions, and you can go back to your friends." She said something to her friends and sat down at my table. "Marge, please be honest with me. I promise I won't tell April anything. I know this wasn't the first time she cheated on me. I just want to know how long this went on." "Jerry, I don't feel comfortable talking about April. We've been friends for a long time. Why don't you just ask her? Because I know that she will lie to me. I just want to know when her cheating started. I know you know that I cheated on her many years ago, but we stayed together for the sake of the children." "Okay, Jerry. I know that many years ago she started an affair with one of your friends. She said she did it to get back at you for cheating on her. I also know that she missed several of our card games, saying she had other things to do. When she got drunk, she always flirted. Do you know the names of those she was with? Jerry, I've already told you too much. I'm sorry you found out about this, but maybe it's for the best." Last question, Marge. The night I walked in on you and April, what happened after I left? She went to the bathroom and cried. I'm sure she regretted what happened. No, she was sorry that I found her. Thank you, Marge. I promise I won't tell her what we talked about. Maybe after my divorce we can go out to dinner. Now I needed to find out which of my so-called friends slept with my wife all those years ago. I had several guesses. For the next couple of months, the only time I saw April was at our children's houses for birthdays or holidays. I never stayed long. I knew there would be arguments, and I didn't want to start them in front of the children. I started playing golf with friends more often. I wanted to understand which of them was the bastard who helped destroy my marriage. I played golf with Tony, Brad, and Charlie. All three were married, and all three had joked and flirted with April at some point. After the game, we went to the bar for a drink. Tony asked how April and I were doing. None of them knew why we filed for divorce. Their wives were friends of April and belonged to her card club. Tony always flirted with waitresses. His wife, Carol, said it was just his personality and he didn't mean anything bad by it. He and Carol had 3 children, and Carol remained plump after giving birth. I remember Tony once saying that he wished Carol looked just like April. Now he has become my main suspect. I started remembering how he acted when I cheated on April with Sarah. I knew he was the one who told April that I was flirting with other women. The next time April called and said she wanted to talk about cheating, I asked her, "What kind of betrayal do you want to talk about?" She was silent for a few seconds and then asked, "What do you mean? I only had one betrayal." "That's not what Tony told me." "What about that time you dated Tony?" She hesitated and said, "Everything Tony said was a lie. I never had an affair with Tony. I told you I can't trust you anymore." She hung up. I knew she was now wondering what exactly I knew. She hasn't called me for over a week. Now I had to figure out how to get back at Tony. He played golf in a league on Wednesdays after work. I knew he usually came into the bar after the game. I saw him come into the bar after the game. I parked in the back and waited for him to come out. I hit him and quickly walked to my car so that no one would notice me. I left. I wasn't sure how I felt at that moment. I decided that this was my way of getting back at him for ruining my marriage. I walked into my local bar, saw my friend Bob there, and sat down with him to have a couple of beers. An hour later, my phone rang. It was April. "What did you do?" "April." I knew it was her. She rarely called my mobile. "What are you talking about?" "Tony is in the hospital. Carol said he was hit. I know it was you." "Are you out of your mind? Why did I have to hit Tony? When and where did this happen?" "I've been here at the bar with Bob for a couple of hours. It's late. I'll visit Tony after work tomorrow." I hung up and explained to Bob that Tony had been beaten and was in the hospital. We agreed to visit him the next day. After the call from April, who tried to blame me, I was sure that Tony was the same person with whom she had her first affair. The next day, as I reflected on my actions, I realized that I was not in my right mind because I would never have done something like that. I actually felt a little sorry. Carol, his wife, was crying. We sat with her for a few minutes and talked. She mentioned that the police do not yet have any leads as to who beat Tony and why. I really felt sorry for her. I promised to come back again in a couple of days. As we were about to leave, April and Marge walked into the hospital. Both looked at me strangely. Bob and I said goodbye and left. Bob said that with the way Tony always flirted with women, it wasn't surprising that some boyfriend or husband hadn't beaten him up sooner. I just agreed. Tony spent a couple of days in the hospital. Carol thanked us again for visiting. It meant a lot to her. Over the next months, I rarely saw Tony. He played golf with us, but he didn't go out drinking after the game anymore, and he never mentioned April in my presence again. A few days after he was released from the hospital, Carol came to see me. She said she wanted to talk. Jerry, 10 or 12 years ago, I found out that Tony was cheating on me. I was pregnant then, I had a big belly. He didn't want to say who he was having an affair with, but the perfume on his clothes was the same scent April wore. I asked him about it, and he denied it was April, but said the affair was over and apologized. This was right around the time you and April were fighting. Why didn't you tell me then? I would figure it out. I talked to April, and she denied having an affair with Tony. I started keeping an eye on them, and they were no longer as flirty as before. I didn't want to interfere with you and let the situation go. But recently I remembered it again when Tony was beaten. You didn't do this, Jerry. No, it wasn't me. That evening I was at the bar with Bob. I didn't even know April was having an affair, especially with one of my friends. Thank you for talking to me. I'm sorry I brought this up, but it's been bothering me. When I saw April in the hospital, all the memories came flooding back. There's nothing to apologize for, Carol. You will always be my friend. I hugged her and really felt sorry. She was a very good person. Most of April's friends stopped talking to me. I still played golf with their husbands, but rarely saw their wives. Apparently, it was time to choose who to stay with, and they chose April. Until the final divorce, April kept asking if there was a chance to get back together. I told her there was no chance. I said that I now knew that she had been cheating on me for years, just when I was trying to be a good husband and father. The only sex she gave me was when she got drunk. We should have divorced years ago, but I stayed for the sake of the children so that we could be a family. The day our divorce was finalized, I felt relieved and at the same time very sad. I really loved April, but now I realize that she didn't feel the same way. On the day of the divorce, I met with Brian, the guy I worked with. He was also divorced, and we decided to go to bars. We used taxis because we didn't want to drive drunk. I planned to get really drunk. We started as a gentleman's club. The drinks there were expensive, but the entertainment was worth it. We stayed there for about an hour and then went to the local bars with music. In some places there were local bands playing, in others there was just a jukebox playing. It was a weekend, so there were a lot of people. In one of the bars, a woman approached me, and I could not believe my eyes. It was Sarah, the same woman with whom I had an affair 12 years ago. Hello, Jerry. How many years? How many winters? Sarah, I thought you moved long ago. How are you? Everything is fine. I got divorced about 8 years ago. My husband and I didn't see eye to eye. A year ago, I returned to the city. This is my friend Sherry. I'm showing her the city. She moved here a couple of months ago. This is my friend Brian. We have known each other almost all our lives. Want to join us? What about your wife? Wouldn't she mind? Brian and I are just celebrating my divorce. Today, everything is finally over. She looked at Sherry and said, in that case, we will help you celebrate. The four of us had a great time, dancing, drinking, and flirting a lot. It was already late when Brian asked the girls if they wanted to continue the party at the motel. They both agreed, and we rented a room with 2 large beds. We were drinking screwdrivers, so I bought a bottle of vodka and 2 liters of orange juice from the bar, and we headed to the motel. Sex with these 2 women was probably the best thing I've ever had. In the morning, when we woke up, we took a shower and went with the girls to have breakfast. I told Sarah it was the best night I'd had in a long time. I took both girls' phone numbers, drove them back to their car parked at the bar, and Brian and I took a taxi back to my apartment. I thanked Brian for a wonderful evening and said we should do it again sometime. Then I decided for myself, from this day on, I will fully enjoy my life. I will spend time with my children and grandchildren and start going on dates sometimes. I won't worry about April and what she's doing anymore. We both made our choice, and now everyone will live their own lives. April. Jerry and I met at my friend's graduation party. We didn't go to the same school, but we discovered that we had mutual friends. We started dating, and I ended up getting a job at his sister's store. Jerry studied at college during the day and worked in the evening. We kissed and hugged a lot, but didn't have sex. We dated for several months before this happened. One day, I was babysitting his sister, and he came in after work. We started kissing and made love for the first time. After that, we had sex whenever the opportunity arose. We were just two young people who didn't care about the consequences. We never used protection, and I got pregnant. I told Jerry's sister about this, and she said I needed to talk to him as soon as possible. She was confident that he would do the right thing. I told him that evening, and he said he would marry me. I replied that he didn't have to do this, that I could handle it myself. You see, the problem was that we were just two young people infatuated with each other. Jerry liked me, but it was more passion than love. I think he felt the same way about me. On the day of our divorce, I met with Brian, my colleague. He was divorced, and we decided to spend the evening having fun in bars. We called a taxi because we didn't want to drive drunk. I planned to drink heavily. We started with a men's club. The drinks there were expensive, but the entertainment was worth it. We stayed there for about an hour and then went to the local bars where there were live bands or music from the jukeboxes. It was a weekend, so the establishments were quite busy. In one of the bars, a woman approached me, and I could not believe my eyes. It was Sarah, the same one with whom I had an affair 12 years ago. "Hello, Jerry. Long time no see." "Sarah, I thought you left town years ago. How are you?" "Everything is fine. I got divorced about 8 years ago. My husband and I didn't see eye to eye. I returned to the city last year. This is my friend Sherry." I showed her around the city. "She moved here a couple of months ago. This is my friend Brian. We have known each other almost all our lives. Want to join us? What about your wife? Will she like it? Brian and I are celebrating my divorce. It was completed today." She looked at her friend Sherry and said, "Then we'll help you celebrate." The four of us were having a great time, dancing, drinking, and flirting a lot. As night approached, Brian suggested that the girls rent a motel room to continue the party. They both agreed, and we took a room with 2 large beds. We were drinking vodka and orange juice, so I bought a bottle of vodka and a couple liters of juice from the bar, and we headed to the motel. Brian handed me a Viagra pill that I had never taken before. He said that I would be grateful to him. Sex with these 2 women was probably the best experience of my life. I started with Sarah, and then we switched partners, and I had sex with Sherry. We drank all the vodka and then passed out. In the morning, when we woke up, we took a shower and took the girls to breakfast. I told Sarah it was the best night I'd had in a long time. I took their phone numbers and drove them back to their car, which was parked at the last bar we were at. Then our taxi took us to my apartment. I thanked Brian for a great evening and said we should do it again someday. At that moment, I decided that from that day on, I would enjoy life. I will spend time with my children and grandchildren and also go on dates occasionally. I won't worry about April and what she does anymore. We both made our choice, and now we can live our lives separately. Jerry and I met at my friend's graduation party. We didn't go to the same school, but we found out that we had mutual friends. We started dating, and I eventually got a job at his sister's store. Jerry studied at college during the day and worked in the evening. We kissed and hugged a lot, but didn't have sex. We dated for several months before this happened. One day, I was babysitting his sister's children, and he came in after work. We ended up having sex. After that, we had sex whenever possible. We were just two young people having sex without really thinking about it. We never used protection, and I got pregnant. I told his sister about it, and she said I needed to talk to Jerry as soon as possible. She assured him that he would do the right thing. I told him about this in the evening, and he replied that he would marry me. I said that he didn't have to, that I could handle it myself. See, the problem was that we were just two young people caught up in passion. I liked Jerry, but it was more like attraction than love. I'm sure he felt the same way. We got married and found a small apartment near his sister's store. I worked until the birth of the child. Jerry attended college during the day and worked full-time at night. On weekends, he worked part-time at his sister's store to earn extra money. After the end of the semester, he dropped out of college. He simply could not keep up with everything. When I was in the hospital, Jerry looked completely confused. He even threw up. I was in the worst pain of my life, and he asked me if I was in pain. Looking back, I realized that I then called him every possible name. It seems funny now, but at the time it wasn't funny at all. He was a good father. He didn't particularly like changing diapers, but he did it. He was outgoing and flirted a lot, which annoyed me. I told him about it, and he accused me of flirting back, and we often blamed each other. About 4 months after our first child was born, I became pregnant again. Jerry's parents were unhappy, and I know they blamed me. I swear I took the pills and never missed a single one. Looks like we were the one couple out of 1,000 for whom the pills didn't work. After the birth of our second child, we bought a small house. I tried to make it cozy. I couldn't believe that just 4 months after giving birth to my second child, I was pregnant again. Jerry's parents almost lost their patience. I literally burst into tears. I told Jerry no more sex until he had the procedure done. After the birth of his third child, Jerry really did it. We decided that 3 children was enough for us. I adored my children and spent all my time with them. Jerry worked most of the time, and I devoted myself to the children. One day, Jerry and I went to a New Year's party, and he started flirting with my girlfriends. I saw him kiss one of them and immediately gave her a dressing down. Jerry said it was just a New Year's kiss, but I knew it wasn't. I knew he had been flirting for years. Every time I was pregnant, he flirted with other women. When I was pregnant, I felt fat and probably unattractive. After having children, I started exercising to look better again. Our friends always said that I looked great. After one of our arguments about his flirting, I told him that if he wanted sex, he should go to one of his girlfriends. He won't get it from me. A few days later, one of our neighbors, who was downright crazy, came to my door and asked for sex. I couldn't believe my ears. I grabbed a kitchen knife and told him that if he came near my house again, I would kill him. He said Jerry slept with his wife Sarah and thought I would do the same to him. I didn't know what to think. I knew this neighbor was crazy, but I believed his words. When Jerry came home, I blamed him. He admitted to sleeping with his neighbor's wife, but said it was the only time. I didn't believe him. There were too many occasions when I noticed his flirting, and in conversations with his friends, they also confirmed his behavior. I knew that Jerry was a good father and always provided for the family, but there was not enough love in our couple. When I asked him if he wanted to leave, he said he would stay if that was what I wanted. I told him he could stay, but there would be no more sex between us. We continued to live under the same roof for the sake of the children. They even slept in the same bed until the children grew up. We did everything together that involved the kids, attending school events, taking them to theme parks, taking them on annual family trips. Jerry sometimes tried to get closer to me, but I always said no. I was sure that he had sex with other women on the side. One of his friends, Tony, often flirted with me. I once asked him about Jerry, and he said that he had never seen him cheat, but he was sure that he cheated. On a scale of 1 to 10, I would rate the importance of sex in my life as a 3, and Jerry would rate it as an 8. We had sex once every 3 months, sometimes less. This happened if we went to some party or had dinner with another couple. Usually I would drink too much, and then we would have sex. For me, it was just sex, not love. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it was very good, but still it was just physical satisfaction. But one day I made a big mistake. After one of our fights, Jerry took the children and went with them to the zoo. I was too angry to go with them and stayed home. I didn't want to take my anger out on the children. I opened a bottle of vodka, added orange juice, and made myself a few cocktails. I was very drunk when there was a knock on the door. It was Tony. He asked to borrow a lawn mower. I invited him in, and soon the flirting began. Long story short, we had sex. It was good, and I decided that I was just getting revenge on Jerry. But I really felt guilty because Tony was married to my friend Carol, who was pregnant with their second child at the time. I continued this affair for about 2 months until I stopped. Sometimes I refused to go to the card club so I could be with Tony. I knew I was hurting Carol, and it depressed me. Carol came up to me one day and told me she thought Tony was cheating on her. I hugged her and said that maybe it was just one time and she should save the family for the sake of the children. I reminded her that Jerry cheated on me once too, but promised that it wouldn't happen again, and we stayed together. I ended my affair with Tony, and I can honestly say that I regret starting it in the first place. I hated myself for hurting Carol. This was many years ago, and life went on. We lived as a family. I started working again when my second daughter was in her senior year, and my son was in his second to last year. After the kids left school, I felt empty nest syndrome. I felt sad and lonely. To keep myself busy, I joined 2 card clubs. Jerry and I became even further apart and did almost nothing together. My eldest daughter got married, and after the birth of my first child, I became something of a full-time nanny. I was ready to do anything for my children and grandchildren. They were my life. Over the next 3 years, all 3 of my children got married. Every time my husband went golfing, I visited one of the children. One of my card clubs organized a bachelorette party in Columbus. We were going to go to a men's show and stay the night. I told Jerry about it and even told him which motel and room I would be staying in. 2 girls were supposed to live in one room, and I stayed with my friend Marge. She had been divorced for about 8 years. We went to the show, and it was fun. Nearly naked men showing off their muscles and dancing. We drank a lot, and thank God, we agreed to stay the night in advance. After the show, the girls went to their rooms. I waited for Marge, who was talking to a couple of dancers. When she returned, she said she had a surprise for me. We entered the elevator and 3 dancers entered with us. I was already drunk and started flirting with the dancers, and they flirted back. We got out on our floor and Marge opened the door to our room. These 3 men came in with us. I was surprised. April, I invited these gentlemen to our room, Marge said. I didn't know what to say. One of the guys hugged me and started kissing me. A few minutes later, the door to our room opened and Jerry was standing there. I went to the bathroom, sat in the bath, and turned on the shower. I had no idea how long I spent there. Marge knocked on the door and walked in. She said the men had left and thanked us for the after-show party. She asked if I was okay, and I told her that Jerry saw us. She replied that she was too busy to notice him. I said he just stood there for a few seconds and left. She offered to stay until the morning, saying that the other girls didn't know about our party. I went to bed and passed out. In the morning, the other girls woke us up and we went to breakfast. Everyone was talking about the dancers and what they would do if they were single. When asked my opinion, Marge said I was too drunk and had a hangover. When I got home, the first thing Jerry said to me was, "I want a divorce." I tried to talk to him and apologize, but he didn't want to hear anything. He said he would sleep in another bedroom until he moved out. I thought I'd wait a day or 2 for him to calm down and try talking to him again. A few days later, he moved out, found himself a small apartment, and hired a lawyer as soon as possible. He said that I also need to find a lawyer. The lawyers arranged a meeting to set the ground rules. Our accounts and credit cards were frozen pending discussion. At the meeting, Jerry looked exhausted. I felt sorry for him. I realized what I had done to him. The lawyers discussed our finances and the division of property for a long time. I had a choice: sell our house or keep it and pay Jerry half the price. The same went for furniture. I didn't want to go into debt again, but I loved this house, filled with memories. Jerry didn't care. He wanted it to end quickly. I kept my car and Jerry kept his truck. We both saved our retirement savings. Everything else was divided equally. The phrase, "you don't realize what you had until you lose it," turned out to be very true. I began to realize that I may never have been deeply in love with Jerry, but now I realized that I did love him after all. We got used to each other. We needed each other. I realized how often it was Jerry who solved small problems around the house. I remembered how often I cooked his favorite dishes for him. Like on those evenings when we were alone at home, we watched movies together. Now I realized that Jerry was a truly good person who I could always rely on. The night I received the final divorce decree, I had a card party with the girls. Thank God I didn't want to be home alone. Time will tell, maybe Jerry and I can be friends again. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next